All right, everybody, welcome back to the #1 television program in the history of the entire universe. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown. All three books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I'm going to be counting down my top 100 favorite science fiction novels of all time. And trust me, I've been reading science fiction novels since, the early, 1500s. I'm an old guy. I've got a lot of books, and I've read a lot of books. In fact, we did our top 100 fantasy novel countdown last month. So this month we're doing science fiction. Let's just get right to it. I'm not going to, babble on anymore. I couldn't keep it to 100. I had to do 101 because I really wanted to include as sort of an honorable mention, Arthur C. Clarke's 2001 A Space Odyssey. So we get started in grand high fashion with Arthur C. Clarke and one of his classic novels at 101. And let's just keep moving. 100, I am going with Elizabeth Moon's Trading in Danger. This is her Vata, book #1 in her Vata series of science fiction space opera 5-book series novel. I just read this, so look for a review of this book soon on my channel, but I liked it enough to put it in my top 100 at exactly 100. And then we are going to move straight to Frank Herbert's Chapter House Dune. This is the 6th book in the Dune series, comes in at number 99. We might be seeing more Dune books on this list here. And then we've got Ender's Shadow, book number 98. This is the companion book to Ender's Game. Just a dope book and a dope series. That's 98. We might be seeing more Orson Scott Card coming up too. Okay, so Robert A. Heinlein, A Moon is a Harsh Mistress, comes in at 97. I read this about a year and a half or so ago. I've got all the Robert Heinlein books. We might see Robert Heinlein on the list again. Number 96. God, we got just classic authors coming in the 90s. Isaac Asimov's Robots of Dawn. This is book, I think, 4 in his I, Robot series. I love this series. It's one of my favorite science fiction series of all time. And look at that magnificent Michael Whelan cover on Robots of Dawn. And then, Margaret Weiss, the Dragonlance lady, she wrote a science fiction trilogy. This is book number 3 in her Star of the Guardians. I absolutely loved how this trilogy ended up. This is classic Star Wars-esque space opera, and Margaret Weiss really finished out this trilogy great with King's Sacrifice. Book number 94 is The Abyss of Light by Kathleen O'Neill Gear. Just gritty, dark science fiction space opera. This stuff is what I love. Kathleen O'Neill knocked it out of the park with this trilogy. This is book number 1 in her Light trilogy, and this is An Abyss of Light. And speaking of Kathleen O'Neill Gear, next on our list at 93 is her husband, W. Michael Gear, with Warriors of Spider coming in at number 93. Again, these guys write some of my favorite science fiction novels of all time, and we will see both of these writers later on in the rankings. Redemption Arc. This is book number 2 in Alastair Reynolds' Absolution. What is this one? The Inhibitor Trilogy. The Inhibitor Trilogy. Yes. Alastair Reynolds, great British writer. And then we've got, at 91, Blue Mars by Kim Stanley Robinson. This is book number 2 in his Mars trilogy. Love this trilogy. Okay, I told you we'd have more W. Michael Gear. At number 90, we've got Relic of Empire. This is book number 2 in his Forbidden Borders series. I love this series. Absolutely love W. Michael Gear. And then we've got the classic Edgar Rice Burroughs at 89, The Gods of Mars. Because this was written 100 years ago, and it's still just dope. Okay, Deathstalker. Rebellion by Simon R. Green. This is pulp science fiction space opera that's just off the hook. And this is book number 2 in his Deathstalker series, coming in at 88. Oh, and more Michael Gear. I got a lot of Michael Gear here. This is a standalone novel by W. Michael Gear. It is Artifact. I absolutely adore this book. And then we've got a standalone novel by C.S. Friedman, and this one is This Alien Shore, with another great Michael Whelan painting coming in at number 86. C.S. Friedman, if you love Frank Herbert and his writing style, the closest that I can recommend to that is C.S. Friedman. She does great science fiction, and we might see her again on the list too. Rendezvous with Rama, another Arthur C. Clarke, but this was kind of a collaboration he did with Gentry Lee. This was Rama 2. Rama 2. I really liked this sequel to Rendezvous with Rama. And maybe we'll see Rendezvous with Rama somewhere else on the list here. And then 84. My guilty pleasure is the Star Wars Legends books. And one of my favorites is Shadows of the Empire by Steve Perry with the great Drew Struzan cover. And Shadows of the Empire falls in between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. It fills in that gap of time. And I loved it. I absolutely loved this, riveted to it, read it when I was younger. One of my favorite science fiction novels. And then we've got Jack McDivitt coming in at 83. And this is Polaris. And look at that gorgeous cover. I think that cover was by, I don't know, John Harris or who, I don't know who does these covers. We'll look it up because I want to get it correct. Dumped it up that I should have known. But anyway, it's a great artist. Let's just say that. 83. This is the Jack McDivitt guy investigates shipwrecks in space. That's what this one's about. And then we've got The Lost Fleet Dauntless by Jack Campbell. This is his book number 1 in the Lost Fleet series. This is such a good space opera, such a good introduction to this series. And then we have Kevin J. Anderson, Hidden Empire. This is book number 1 in his, I think it's a 7 or 8 book series called the Saga of Seven Sons. I think it's 7 books. Hidden Empire by Kevin J. Anderson. Great space opera. Love this book. Then we've got Stephen Donaldson, the guy who wrote Thomas Covenant. He wrote a big science fiction series in the 90s, and it was one of my favorites. And this is book number 2. No, book number 3. This is book number 3. A Dark and Hungry God Arises. Probably the darkest, grittiest, most violent science fiction series you're ever going to read. I love Kate Elliott. She had a lot of books on my top 100 fantasy novel list, but she's also got a couple books on my top 100 science fiction. Coming in at number 79 is His Conquering Sword. This is book number 3 in her Sword of Heaven. Oh, this is book number 2 in her Sword of Heaven series. That's just such a great illustration by Jim Burns, too. Love that. Coming in at 78, we have The White Mountain. This is book number 3 in David Wingrove's Chung Cow series. I just recently reviewed book number 1 on my channel a few weeks ago. This is a dynamite science fiction series. Speaking of dynamite science fiction series, Foreigner. This is the first book in C.J. Cherry's Foreigner series, a great Michael Whelan painting. And this series is, I think, about 30 or 40 books long at this point, but this is a great starting point. And then we've got Martha Wells, the first Murderbot book. I love these. I've only read about 3 of these. It's about 7 or 8. But All Systems Red was the first one. I think that was the first, yeah. Sometimes I get confused. I'm easily confused, people. Martha Wells, Murderbot, book number 1. And then we've got Ready Player One. Just 80s nostalgia, just weird, virtual reality stuff. It's just computer game nonsense. I loved every bit of this. This was one of the most engaging, fun reads you're ever going to have. And that comes in at 75, Ready Player One. And then we have Dark Run by Mike Brooks. This is a little-known series, and it's got a great painting, another great painting by that one guy that I couldn't remember his name, and his name is John Harris, yes. John Harris, I got it. I knew it was that. Dark Run, another great space opera science fiction. And then Ben Bova's The Rock Rats. This is book number 1 in his asteroid series. There's a series of about 5 or 6 books where he's got these guys that are mining asteroids that are orbiting the Earth and other planets and things. It's just great, absolutely. We got another W. Michael Gear, and this is book number 1 in his Donovan series, coming in at number 72. That is Outpost. This book was like this is like space opera mixed with horror. It is just super cool. And then we've got book number 71, Tad Williams' Otherland, Sea of Silver Light. This is the final volume, volume 4 of his Otherland series. One of my favorite series of all time. Tad Williams, one of my favorite writers of all time. This book is just so cool. This is another like Ready Player One kind of virtual reality science fiction saga, but a little more serious than Ready Player One. Let's throw this one on the floor too. Oh, another Jack McDivitt, another one of these. This is the Talent for War, an Alex Benedict novel. Yeah, there's a series of novels starring Alex Benedict, and he's kind of like searches for artifacts in outer space. But this is book number 1 was really cool. And then we've got House Atreides, a Dune book by Frank Herbert's son, Brian Herbert, and Kevin J. Anderson. I'll probably take a lot of shit for putting, this on here, because a lot of people that are Frank Herbert devotees, they just thought that things should end with the Frank Herbert books. But I like the continuation of the saga that Kevin J. Anderson and Brian Herbert have done. And House Atreides is really good. Just a really good space opera is what it is. On Basilisk Station, book number 1 in David Weber's Honor Harrington series comes in at number 68. And it's just such a great series. And it's about 19 or some odd books long at this point. But book number 1 really sets the stage. Great characterizations. Book number 67, another one of my guilty pleasure Star Wars Legends books. This is Bloodlines. This is part of the Legacy of the Force series, book number 2. This is one of my favorite Star Wars books of all time. It is just really, really cool. And then coming in at number 66 is Robert Heinlein's Number of the Beast, and we might see some more Robert Heinlein on here too. He is one of my favorite classic science fiction novelists. 65, we've got The Naked God, book number 3 in Peter F. Hamilton's. I think this is the Night's Dawn trilogy. This is book number 3. This trilogy has more ideas packed into it than, these are thick books too. Just so good. Well, there might be a few more of those on Chasm City. I knew we would have some Alistair Reynolds or more Alistair Reynolds. Yeah, I knew I'd brought one of this. Is number 64. Chasm City. This is part of his Revelation Space universe, Chasm City. This is mind-blowing. This is mind-blowing. Speaking of mind-blowing, and I don't even know how to say this author's name, but he comes in at number 63, and that is IQ84 or 1Q. I don't even know. But this is by Haruyuki Moriyama. I'll just hold it up. You can pronounce it yourself. This is like the Neil Stevens of Japanese literature. I think this is, Chinese, whatever. Golden Sun, book number 2 in Pierce Brown's Red Rising series. I like book number 2 way more than book number 1. Enough so that it ended up at 62 on my list. And then we got another Tad Williams Otherland book, and that is Mountain of Black Glass, book number 3 in the Otherland series. We've already talked about Tad Williams. All the Tad Williams Otherland books have spectacular Michael Whelan paintings. Can't go wrong with Michael Whelan paintings. Oh, and then we've got number 63, The Memory of Earth by Orson Scott Card. This is an interesting book because it's kind of like, if you've ever read the Book of Mormon, I grew up in Utah, or Mormon and stuff like that. If you've ever read the Book of Mormon, this is Orson Scott Card placing the storyline of the Book of Mormon in outer space, in a space opera setting. And it's kind of interesting if from that angle, but if you don't even know anything about the Book of Mormon, it's still a pretty good space opera series. Let's see, another C.S. Friedman, The Madness Season, comes in at 59. And look at that gorgeous cover by Michael Whelan. And the cool thing about it is it wraps around to this other great image on the other side. C.S. Friedman, I said, if you love Frank Herbert, you're going to love C.S. Friedman. She does great. Another Peter F. Hamilton book, Judas Unchained. This is book number 2 in his Pandora's Star series. Comes in at number 58. Just a big, huge, chonking space opera, high tech, full of magnificent, huge ideas. This is book number 2, Judas Unchained, and we'll see where book number 1 falls on my list. We've got Ian Banks. Ian M. Banks. Consider Phlebas. This is just a weird... Ian Banks just writes the weirdest space opera that you're ever going to read. But it's really like far out there with magnificent, big, huge ideas. Speaking of big ideas, Ringworld by Larry Niven might be one of the biggest science fiction ideas to ever be introduced to literature. And it's just so cool. Just the idea is the story, not really the characters, but the idea is so good that it carries this book into, well, number 56 on my list anyway. More Chung Kao, The Broken Wheel. This is book number 2 in David Wingrove's Chung Kao series, one of my favorite science fiction series of all time. Like I said, I just reviewed book 1 not long ago on the channel. If you want to watch that review, just look it up. Another Kate Elliott. Well, this is the Kate Elliott. We've had a Kate Elliott on here before. This is Duran, book number 1 in her Duran series. It is the first novel of Duran, called Duran, another Jim Burns cover. We saw the other cover that he did for just really cool book. Gosh, we've got so many cool books already, and we're not even halfway through. Snow Crash. Speaking of cool books, Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson comes in at number 53. Just a cool cyberpunk bit of literature. And then we've got, some more Star Wars Legends. I told you it's my guilty pleasure. You're going to see some of these on this list, but this is the Heir to the Empire. This is the first Star Wars Legends book to ever be written by Timothy Zahn. Just absolutely cool. Then we've got one of my favorite new writers on the scene, and that's Andy Weir, and his third book, Project Hail Mary, actually made me cry. It's just a really good science fiction story. We got some more Frank Herbert. We've got Dune Messiah. Everybody knows Dune Messiah. We won't say too much about that one. Then we've got some more Peter F. Hamilton. This is book number 2 in his A Night's Dawn trilogy. And this is The Neutronium Alchemist. And I told you these books were big. This trilogy is enormous. It's absolutely enormous. Filled with so many crazy ideas and so much cool space opera stuff speaking of one of my favorite science fiction ideas of all time, David Weber's Off Armageddon Reef and his this saga. What is this? I don't know what this saga is called, but anyway, it's Off Armageddon Reef. This is book number 1, and there's I'm looking up there on my shelf. There's 10 books, 11 books in the series right now. Just absolutely cool. This is so cool. I love David Weber, and this series is dope. Off Armageddon Reef. 47, we've got another C.J. Cherry book. This is The Pride of Chanur. This is book number 1 in her 5-book Chanur series. Just absolutely blew me away. I just read this about 6 months ago, and I absolutely loved it. It was so, so cool. And then we've got another Christopher Rocchio. Have I done Christopher Rocchio yet? No, I think this is the first one that I'm mentioning. This is book number 3 in his Sun Eater series. This is Demon in White. My favorite new science fiction author is Christopher Rocchio, and he's actually a good friend of mine. We've done book signings together, and his series is so good. The Sun Eater series is going to go down as one of the classic science fiction series of all times. Okay, now coming in at number 44 and number 45, two of my favorite science fiction novels of all time are The Integral Trees and The Smoke Ring by Larry Niven. Again, two super Michael Whelan covers. This is one of my... I adore these books. And my gosh, what comes in at number 43? Cixin Liu, I don't know how to say his name. The Three-Body Problem. This is book number 2 in the what is the name of this? The Three Body Problem series, I guess. But this is The Dark Forest. I read and reviewed this about a year ago. Haven't got to book number 3 yet, but book number 2 was so good it came in at number 43 on my list. Book number 42 on my list, it could be none other than The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. You know, there's subliminal messages in all of my this whole list and the numbers and the books. I think you get it. Oh, book number 41, The Summer Queen by Joan D. Vinge, or Joan D. Ving. I don't know how to pronounce her name. But look at that. This is one of the coolest space operas you're ever going to read. And it's a big book, and it's the sequel to The Snow Queen, which you might see that one on the list. 41, book number 41, a great Michael Whelan painting. One of my favorite works of art in all of illustration. Speaking of Michael Whelan paintings, we've got another Michael Whelan painting on Caves of Steel. This is book number 40. This is part of, I think this is book number 2 or 3 in the I, Robot series by Isaac Asimov. And then we've got book number 39 coming in, which is Battlefield Earth by L. Ron Hubbard. Probably, I think this might have been the very first science fiction novel I ever read. I was really young. And I'm going to reread it soon and leave a review on the channel. I just remember this is more of a nostalgia pick for me just because I read it. It's so young in age and it made such an impression on me. Battlefield Earth at 39. And then we've got another Peter F. Hamilton, The Reality Dysfunction. This is just one of the coolest books you're ever going to read. And it's book number 1 in his Night's Dawn trilogy. I've already showed you book 2 and 3. This trilogy, you just have to get this. You just have to get this. If you love anything about science fiction, if you know anything about, you gotta, and then we've got The Three Body Problem, which came in at number 37. This would kind of blew me away. I wasn't going in expecting much. I don't really like books written in other languages that are translated into English. I think we lose some of the flair of the language. But whatever, I liked this. It blew my mind in a lot of ways. And then we've got another Star Wars Legends book because, I love those. This is The New Rebellion by Kristen Catherine Rush. Book number, this is 36. I love the Star Wars Legends. And the Drew Struzan covers are so incredibly good. And then we've got another Tad Williams. Book number 35 is Otherland, The River of Blue Fire. This is book number 2 in his Otherland series. Just another great Michael Whelan painting. Speaking of Michael Whelan, here is The Princess of Mars at number 34, the Edgar Rice Burroughs, book number 1, and Edgar Rice Burroughs, John Carter of Mars. Another great Michael Whelan painting. And, again, a book that was written over 100 years ago is just cool. Another one by Christopher Racchio, Howling Dark, book number 2 in his Sun Eater series. Howling Dark, I've already gushed on and on about Christopher Racchio. He's one of the best new writers on the scene. Absolutely fantastic. And then we've got, this is one of my favorite science fiction novels of all time. And it's coming in at 32. Speaker for the Dead by Orson Scott Card. I think Battlefield Earth was the first ever science fiction novel I read. Then Ender's Game was the second. And then this was the third. And this was like the darkest one. And it just blew me away as a little kid. Ben Bova, Mars. Oh, I love Ben Bova books. And Mars is so good. This is one of the greatest books about the exploration of Mars that you'll find. Along with my number 30, Kim Stanley Robinson's Red Mars. I like these two First Trip to Mars books. That's what these are. First Trip to Mars. First Trip to Mars. Each author's take on that. 30 and 31. Book number 29 is A Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert Heinlein. This is number 29, I groak everything about this book. Let's see. Then we've got the more Margaret Weiss, The Lost King. Again, her Star of the Guardians series. This is the first book in it. Just such a cool space opera. by Margaret Weiss, star of the Guardians. Again, she was popular for the Dragonlance things. Field of Honor, my favorite Honor Harrington book. This is book number 4, I think, in the Honor Harrington series. Comes in at number 27. I love David Weber. Just military science fiction. Nobody does it better than David Weber. And this is the best book in the Honor Harrington series. And then following on that, we've got The Children of Dune. Oh, I love this book. How is this ranked so low? This should be higher. 26, The Children of Dune. Just one of my favorite novels of all time. And then we've got, speaking of people that write as well as Frank Herbert, another C.S. Friedman book. This is C.S. Friedman's first ever novel, and it is coming in at number 25, and that is In Conquest Born. Just such a good book, such a good book. Oh, and then Peter F. Hamilton, Pandora's Star. This is book number 1. Maybe you saw me hold up Judas Unchained, the sequel to this. Again, Peter F. Hamilton has written some of the biggest, most epic science fiction novels of all time, and this one is so cool. Book number 23, Chung Kao. Chung Kao, book number 1 in the Chung Kao series by David Wingrove. I just read and reviewed this one on the channel not long ago. We got to motor through these. Treasure of Light by Kathleen O'Neill Gear is at 22. This is one of my favorite. And then we've got her and her husband, W. Michael Gear, which in this comes in at 21, Requiem of the Conqueror, Requiem for the Conqueror. They write such great science fiction novels. That's all I'm going to say about it. I mean, they finish that high. So now let me go over here and get the other books closer. So, top 20, and coming in at number 20 is another Star Wars, my favorite Star Wars Legends book, book 1 in the Han Solo trilogy, The Paradise Snare by A.C. Crispin. Probably my favorite. I loved the Han Solo movie. I just wish they'd do a sequel. Another Peter F. Hamilton, Revelation Space. This is book number 1 in his Revelation Space. The Inhibitor trilogy, or Book of Universe, whatever. It's just good. Let me just say that. And then we've got Gene Wolfe, Night Side of the Long Sun. This is kind of like Rendezvous with Rama, mixed with The Shadow of the Torturer by Gene Wolfe. And that's all I'm going to say, but it's just so well done. Oh, speaking of Rendezvous with Rama, coming in at number 17 is Rendezvous with Rama with Arthur C. Clarke. Just such a cool first contact. It's just, you got to read it. It's not that big. It's such, the first time I read this in one sitting, and it was just really cool. Old Man's War by John Scalzi. This is like Ender's Game, but with old people. Such an engaging, fun read that just keeps the pages turning. And probably one of my favorite space opera series of all time is Deathstalker. We've already had one Deathstalker book on the list, but this one is coming in at number 15. It is just so good. Simon R. Green's Deathstalker, just so bloody brilliant. And then we also had more. This is the Snow Queen by Joan D. Ving, or Joan D. Vinge, I don't know. Another great Michael Whalen painting. Such a unique space opera science fiction idea. And then we get down to some more W. Michael Gear. This is The Way of Spider, book number 2 in his Spider trilogy. Probably, my 13th favorite science fiction novel of all time. And then, of course, Ray Bradbury at Fahrenheit 451 comes in at number 12. I'm Crazy and I'm 17. This is just such a cool science fiction novel with a great message behind it. And then we've got Isaac Asimov's Foundation, number 11. Number 11. This book and the ideas that Isaac Asimov put in this book in the 1950s and 60s when he was doing this trilogy are the basis for every Star Wars space opera, Battlestar Galactica. And then look at the great Michael Whalen painting again. Michael Whalen does all of the great artwork. I'm going to get the last 10. So we've got the last 10, my top 10 right here. And it starts off in high fashion with one of the funnest reads. This is one of the funnest books I've ever read, and that is John Scalzi's Red Shirts. I loved everything about this, from the sense of humor to the concept to everything. And I'm not even a Star Trek fan. Stephen R. Donaldson's Dark Gap Cycle series, and this is book number 2 in that, Forbidden Knowledge. This was another book that I read when I was pretty young, and it was just so grim and so dark. I fell in love with it. Christopher Rocchio comes in at number 8. The 8th greatest science fiction novel. Christopher Rocchio, my friend, my buddy, with Empire of Silence, book number 1, and the Sun Eater Saga. Just go get these books if you want some. The Martian by Andy Weir. One of the most compelling, compulsive, readable books that you're ever going to, you can't look away from this book when you're reading it. It's so good. And what an elegant cover they gave it. Book number 6, and that is Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey. Of course, we know James S.A. Corey is the pseudonym for 2 authors, Daniel Frank and Abraham. Daniel, I don't know what their names are. I screwed that up. It's right here, though. Sure, it's in the back. I don't know. Frank and Abraham wrote these. That's all I'm going to say. Leviathan Wakes. They made a TV show of it. It is one of the coolest, most recent space opera cool things. In any way, we'll move on to Tad Williams at number 5 with Otherland. Book number 1 in the Otherland, the virtual reality series by Tad Williams, comes in at number 5. Another great Michael Whelan painting. I love this series. Michael Whelan is one of my favorite artists, and Tad Williams, one of my favorite authors. Neil Stephenson's Cryptonomicon. I don't even know if this is science fiction, but it's fucking awesome. And that comes in at number 4. I can't even describe it. Most Neil Stephen books are undescribable. Just go get them and read them. My 3rd favorite science fiction novel of all time, Carl Sagan's Contact. I was riveted to this book from the opening page to the end. And then when the movie came out, and the movie was fairly close to it's just one of my favorite science fiction movies too. Book number 2 is none other than Ender's Game. Probably, well, aside from the next book I'm going to do, this is probably the best science fiction novel ever written. It's for all ages, and it just works in every way conceivable, and absolutely wonderful. Only one other book is better than that in the science fiction field, and that is Dune, my friends. Need I say more? This is the greatest science fiction book ever written, and that is my top 100. And now let's look at this this pile of books here on the floor, because I just tossed every single one of them on the floor there. So that'll probably get a lot of your blood boiling when you see that pile of science fiction books. Anyway, that's all I have to say today about that. And so, we did that in less than, oh my God, 30 minutes.